I'm Jerry Cuomo. We're going to get this show started, if that's okay with you. Good, good. So far, Java 1, doing well? Good. I got in really late last night, but I'm still kind of on East Coast time, so for some reason I have this amazing amount of uncoffee-fueled energy, so bear with me today. I'm Jerry Cuomo. I'm the CTO for the WebSphere brand of products. And it's my pleasure being here at Java 1. You know, the last time I was at Java 1 was the very first Java 1. And I'm going to guess it was like 1998 or something like that. And where have I been all this time? It's a good question. And you know, I kind of reflected being at the first one. I hope people don't say, oh, he's here because it's the last one. And my feelings are completely opposite of that. I think I'm here because there's a revolution. And the revolution is going to energize and has energized the world that we're living in. And Java is very much in the critical zone. So I wanted to share that excitement with you today. Fundamentally, the engaging enterprise is an idea to try to kind of surround what's happening today in modern IT. Today I'm going to present some motivation, and if you got eyes and ears and a brain and have been living along with me, you're going to hopefully recognize a lot of this. It's not going to be completely new stuff. I'm going to propose a design at a very high level of how to kind of think about the engaging enterprise. Give an example, a somewhat fabricated example, showing using some of our products. And again, the point here isn't to kind of dwell on the products, but just show you how you might get something done. And then we've actually built this application, or an example application, in Java, and I'll kind of take you through some of the highlights of that. So 4 parts. Motivation, design, somewhat abstract example, and then a little bit more specific example. But if you know me, or anything about me, you know I'm a storyteller. So I'll start with a story. Every year, one of the things I do as the CTO is motivate, try to capture what our customers are living through, try to capture what our technical team is experiencing, and try to capture it in the form of trends and directions. So I usually do a blog on the WebSphere trends and directions, your favorite year goes here. A couple years ago, I did, actually 2011, I actually tried to do a little bit of a gimmick to go along with the trends and directions, because sometimes they get a little dry and I need to kind of get people allured, kind of drag them in. The WebSphere Rock and Roll Band sang the trends and directions in 2011 to a tune called WebSphere Rock that Elvis would probably turn over on his grave if he heard, because it sounded strikingly like Jailhouse Rock. This year, in the spirit of one of the trends, which is social business, I decided to actually not just to do a blog, but also to create a Facebook page and to see how maybe that would engage some of the, if there's any user community out there around this stuff, to kind of use it as a living document, because unlike my blog, you can actually go into this Facebook page on each of the sections, on each of the trends you can interact with. It also reached some unlikely people doing this through Facebook. My son, who's 17 years old, would never read my blog. But he did notice that Dad created a new page on Facebook, so we went out to explore it. And he looked at the trends, and he said in somewhat sarcastic tone, "Wow, Dad, you're some visionary in IBM, and you actually think mobile is important? That's pretty observant of you," the wise ass that he is. And he went on to kind of talk about some of the other trends that I had posted on. And that was the first indication that perhaps I was in for a little bit of a ride by doing some social networking around the topics. The other thing that came back was a little bit more striking, although the other one hurt too. But this one was really so wait, IBM has WebSphere application server, which is a Java platform for building enterprise applications. Now you're proposing a mobile platform, a cloud platform, a social platform. Jerry, what the hell is going on at IBM? How many platforms are there? And I sure didn't mean that, but I guess that's the way it came out. So it was good, this kind of social interaction that we started with. And that's kind of where the thought of there has to be something about these things. I sure hope the answer isn't there are 5 new platforms and every one of them is completely different, start over again. Although, it would be interesting for various industry views. I think there are a lot of folks in mobile these days that would like mobile to be completely different. It's not, although there are some things that are more than just nuances that we all need to pay attention to. So the first thing I did this year after publishing this Facebook page was to really look at this notion of perhaps there's one platform, and perhaps that platform isn't too different than what we've been doing. Maybe all of the principles that we've been kind of evolving around Java and SOA have some validity in this new world. So the thought of the engaging enterprise design really started to come into view as an approach to building applications that really isn't about separating and thinking about mobile, cloud, social, and big data all as different things, but thinking about them as one thing. So to start out, a buddy of mine and I just were chatting one morning, and he sketched down some of these things. And again, if you were and know of a person like my son who's a bit sarcastic, he would say something like, "Dad, people are doing this already." And that may be fair, and maybe they're not doing it to the extent that I'm talking about it here. But that's not the point. The point here is to think about the styles of applications that people are writing today. How many of you know about Geoffrey Moore? And Geoffrey's been talking about these days systems of engagement, driving transactions to system of record. I think JEE has been the cornerstone for defining systems of record. Will it be the cornerstone of defining systems of engagement? Maybe. Maybe yes. So what are these applications? How many of you out there, you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want, but how many of you out there, food for thought, would have predicted where Amazon is today as an extension of the web? Think about 1995, 96, 97, again, the first Java 1. Would we have, I was there, I don't know how many of you were there, would have imagined Amazon in the form that they are now, utilizing the channel of the web the way they have. And I'm not just talking about their cloud offerings, which I think are very interesting right now and topic of discussion, but I'm talking about their commerce site. One button buy, Prime, and all of that kind of stuff. They've really leveraged and utilized the power of the web. And I like to, some people say arrogantly believe, that platforms like WebSphere Application Server help pave the way for customers, maybe not Amazon per se, although they're a fairly good Java consumer, but pave the way for enterprises of that date to be more engaging through the web. So the question is, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what sorts of applications, what sorts of Amazons are going to be born out there? And what are they going to be doing? And what sort of platform is going to pave the way? What's the programming model that's going to pave the way for those styles of engaging application? And again, I'm going to go ahead and say it's about, the new platform is about, and I very much subscribe to Geoffrey's vision around systems of engagement, driving systems of record, that style of application. I believe mobile is at the center. You're going to hear that over and over, and you're going to see that in the examples of that. So in this example, get warmed up a little bit. This first example is a pretty simple one. Person walks into a retail store, perhaps a year from now or 2 years from now, or maybe some retail stores do it today. When they cross the threshold, perhaps they check in with that retail store. Maybe they're friends with that retail store on a social network like Facebook. Or maybe through some near-field chip control, it does it automatically. So upon walking through the threshold, a message is sent with your identity and your location. Immediately, what happens is systems of record kick in, and some analytics is done on your past purchase history. Perhaps even people who are also friends with that social network, their past purchase history is compared. And right there, before your foot touches down into that retail institution, that company has the perfect strategy for interacting with you as a customer. And perhaps they toss out a set of business promotions to you right there and then through an SMS based on what they think you might be doing in that store. Or maybe they use like some really cool immersive user interface technology and using augmented reality. And as you pass by that purple shirt, it reminds you, Jerry, you just bought a pair of purple pants last month. That shirt will go perfect with it. Right? Again, the point is an application. That was a joke. Kind of. If you know me, maybe I did buy a pair of purple pants. Social, mobile, big data, cloud coming together to create an engaging style of application. Systems of engagement, driving systems of record. All right? This one I like a little bit better. You can see these. Again, they're just sketches to stretch the imagination of what an engaging enterprise might be and what an engaging application might be. This one I like a little bit more because the innovator here, the person building the application, isn't a big retailer. It's a small ISV, perhaps, building an application using APIs. I'm going to talk a lot about APIs in a few minutes. They're using APIs from a car company, from insurance companies, and from the government. And what they've decided is that they can build an application that might revolutionize insurance. Now, if anyone's from an insurance industry here, I'm not trying to propose something that is not suited for today's regulations. It's just to stretch your imagination of cloud, social, big data, again, coming together for a new style of application. And in this application, when you start your car up, it knows it's Jerry and it's Monday. And on Mondays, when I'm in North Carolina, I usually drive my car to work. In fact, the other interesting part about this application is that the mobile device isn't a phone, but it's a car. And we're actually doing a lot of work with car companies. It's amazing the number of data points and sensors are in cars these days. There's some good research on the Ford research site that talks about seat belts that take your blood pressure and steering wheels that sense your perspiration. That combined with sensors in your accelerator and your brakes, your anti-lock system, etc., could provide interesting data when combined and matched up with other things. So in this example, when I start my car, it knows the routes that I take to work. This third-party innovator has been tracking that based on my permission because they're going to do something good for me. And it realizes that me, I usually take a certain route to work. It also notices that my friends who also work for IBM perhaps take similar routes for work. And it can start calculating a risk profile for me. And it can use that risk profile, along with other data that it gets from the government, like around where accidents are happening and all this. And I saw a Progressive ad for this not too long ago, like a couple days ago, that talked about how you can liberate car sensor data to get better insurance rates. But this person goes further. What they do is they auction off your risk profile to companies participating, insurance companies participating, and they'll get you insurance just for that trip. And the deal, otherwise, the idea there is given all of those factors, in the presence of all that data, perhaps that insurance bid, quote, will be right priced per sip. Just enough insurance for that trip. And at the end of the month, instead of getting your bill from a big insurance company like Geico or Allstate, You're going to get your insurance bill aggregated by this third-party innovator. The days you don't drive, you don't pay insurance. When your car is parked in your garage, or like my mom, maybe she'll take her car out 5 times a month, it's covered by our homeowner's insurance. Again, engaging application, systems of engagement, driving systems of record. It's about mobile, cloud, social, and big data coming together to create a new style of application. So far, plausible, perhaps? I mean, you can come up probably with 100 better examples, but this is kind of the style of application that is starting to frame our thinking in IBM as we look at what's the next generation of the WebSphere set of capabilities. Heck, the IBM software capabilities going forward. This is what's driving us. All right, I've said this already. There's a new era of engaging applications. I think this era will make the web era pale in comparison. And that's why I said, yes, I was at the first Java 1, and here I am again, because I think what we have to say here is every bit as important as what we had to say at the first Java 1. We've been spending all of our time, rightly so, focused on the internal aspects of the enterprise. The first thought around an engaging enterprise design is we're going to start thinking about the external part of your enterprise. Think about your phone. Right? Your phone, if it's a Droid model, a Microsoft model, or an Apple model, they're typically beautiful on the outside, easy to engage the end user on their terms. Right? Focusing on the exterior design of your enterprise is key for an engaging enterprise. If you open up your enterprise and look what's inside, it's all the stuff that we've been working on for the last 15 years or more. Like if you popped open the cover of your iPhone, the inner workings are sufficiently complex. Sufficiently. Because you run an important institution. It's not simple. And certainly the solutions aren't simplistic. So that, systems of record, systems of engagement, thinking of these things as so on. So the design has 3 simple parts to it. First is to extend by externalizing and synchronizing. The next is to transact with security and scale. And the third is to optimize with insights. And folks, I will get you out of the nosebleed seats quickly and drive into some detail here, but I'm trying to set kind of the frame. So the platform, as we build out and evolve our platform, they're going to take these into consideration. Now, I think we do transact pretty well. I think it's the kind of the bookends around extend and optimize that we need a little bit more focus on, and I think transact needs a bit of a facelift. So just reflecting on how this compares to where we are with our existing compute platforms today. So let's go through the design one aspect at a time. So we'll start with extend. What are you extending? You're extending the core services. These are the things that you've been working on for the last 15 years, using architectures like service-oriented architecture. I'm not saying start off by chucking everything that you've built. These are, however, the services that you want to liberate and externalize. And I assert that you do not want to externalize these things verbatim. They need to be beautiful. They need to be presentable to the outside world. You need to clean and cleanse your data before you expose it. You can't have internal attributes buried in XML schema that says this customer is kind of a little flaky and perhaps a little risky. That has to be cleaned up when you provide an external interface on that. And that's just a couple of aspects. There are 2 new constructs that day-to-day in an external and a engaging enterprise that you're going to be thinking about. One is APIs. So why did I break out APIs as opposed to core services? So APIs are your public services. These are the beautiful services that you expose to developers, to end users, to business partners. Right? They're designed with that express focus and intent. So that's APIs. APIs are your company's electronic persona. The growth in APIs is at the foundation of what we're seeing around the engaging enterprise design. If you look at companies like PayPal, Best Buy, these are use cases that are documented pretty liberally on the internet. They're kind of reached the tipping point. There are more people using and more things using their APIs than people sitting at the other end of their web browser-based applications. All right, so APIs are a key part of the engaging enterprise. So we'll talk about recommendations around building those. But apps are next. And this is what actually engages the end user. And I'm not talking about Angry Bird sorts of apps per se. These are about enterprise applications that perhaps use your APIs to get at your systems of record. APIs need not be, apps need not be things that particularly run on smartphones. They can be things that run in your car. We're working with St. Jude Medical, and we have an engaging app that runs as part of a pacemaker. We're monitoring 120,000 pacemakers in the field. That's not only an engaging app, that's also a mission-critical app, especially if you're that end user. All right, so apps drive APIs. Now, there's another nuance on extend that we haven't had to deal before. When you deploy your WAR file in your enterprise, everything is peachy keen. Now, you're also deploying something outside your enterprise's protected core, right? You're packaging up and deploying an app to an app store, right? How do you manage that app? Publish it. Perhaps you're pushing out a piece of application code to Salesforce. And I think about this as kids growing up, you teach them how to share in your house. You teach them the rules of security. Don't run out the front door. Don't open the door to strangers, all that kind of stuff. We've been building our code to live on premise for the last 15, 20, 30, 40 years. Now, how do your kids behave when they're living in other people's houses? Do they share multi-tenancy? Do they run out the front door screaming, security? You got to think of these things, isolation. How does this all work? All right. The other powerful part of extending is you have now the power as an enterprise developer to reach out and tap your end user on the shoulder and say, hey, now's a great time to transact, right through notifications. Use it sparingly. It's just like the Darwinian laws that applied when you were building interactive web applications. The ones that just took their green screens and put them out in front of users, Darwin deemed as underachievers. But similarly, those who, bombarded their customers with banner ads were also naturally selected out. Right? So you have to be respectful in how you use that ability to tap users, but it's a very powerful tool. Okay, what protects and scales? This is about transactors, securely and elastically. Now, environments like Java and JEE have excelled around transacting. But again, there are some nuances here that are worth specifying. Security protocols that are emerging, that must pay attention to, aren't necessarily rooted in a single authority. Right? You have someone who is using your API, who has an account that's accessing information on behalf of someone else. I'm using, Mint, and Mint is going to access my Bank of America credit card information. Right, so it's three-party security, things that you see in OAuth, really important these days. Control. Right? I'm opening up my enterprise APIs to third-party developers. They get exactly 1,000 calls or 100 calls a day. Quota management. How do I govern that? How do I scale that back? Throttle. Right? Gold, silver, bronze. All right? All of that when you're dealing with engaging enterprise. Scale. I mean, we've done some work with ESPN on their mobile web app for fantasy sport leagues. And, Sunday afternoon, touchdown, boom. They need to scale. They need to fire up another couple hundred JVMs there and then. That's crazy. What's driving interactions, driving transactions these days. Resiliency and accounting, all important, I would say. There are additional nuances for all of these things. We know them well, but there's additional nuances. Okay, so what is the cherry on top of this pattern? And that's optimize. The ability to use insights gained from being right in your customer's back pocket to optimize your business, right, in real time. Right? So extensions, it's not just about interacting, some REST calls, right? Driving transactions back to a database. It's about this parallel universe that you now have the ability to set up with all of the data that you have coming in from these interactive applications to write agents that are running in parallel to your interactive and transactive applications that are noticing behaviors, correlating activities, perhaps driven by business rules, right, that are reacting in real time to things that are being observed. Marketing things, security things, all sorts of things. Depending on your role, the things will be slightly different. Right? If you're a business person, security officer or marketing officer, you're going to be looking for a set of specific rules and patterns. If you're a developer that is building out the system, you're going to be used to speeds and feeds like you're normally used to, getting insight into the interactions and transactions, how to scale it, manage it, isolate it, etc. If you're a third-party developer, can't get the app to work, it's because your security token is expired. Right? Those kinds of insights will depend on who you are. All right, that was the abstract design, and then before that, the motivation. So now an example. We'll run through two examples, all around this fictitious company called Acme Airlines. First, we'll do a walkthrough that is role-based, and then I'll kind of drill into, we've written this application at least 3 or 4 times, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Java incarnation of the application. All right, here's Clara, and she's a business leader at Acme Airlines. And she wants to do 2 things. She wants to drive more transactions and increase customer satisfaction utilizing mobile and social technologies. Seems like 2 reasonable things to have happen. And I think, again, all application development should be measured against some business goals. So we'll start off with that. But, of course, you can't get too far without having to sit down and chat with your DevOps team. And there is James. And together they come up with this checklist of things to do around Acme Airlines to achieve those goals. They want to extend APIs to developers. They want to extend their existing mobile app and make it more engaging. They want to transact securely and elastically, and they want to optimize using business rules. So that's how they're going to achieve Clara's. Oh, and by the way, there's the engaging enterprise pattern of extend, transact, and optimize. Go figure. So they start off defining what services they're going to externalize. And again, this is probably as much a business activity as it is a technical activity. So Clara and James come up with the following. They're going to create APIs for price quotes, booking, transacting tracking bags and subscribing for offers and delays. The first two, they hope are going to relate to driving more transactions. And the second two, they hope are going to increase customer satisfaction. That's their plan. See how it goes. So creating APIs. We just stood up the software as a service offering for creating web APIs. And with it, you can create, document, assemble, and publish APIs. It's part of our Cast Iron Live solution. So if you Google Cast Iron Live web APIs, you'll be brought to this. This is just one example of how someone might create a set of web APIs. So what is a web API? Well, in this case, what you're looking at is Cast Iron Live's way of creating a web API. And it's basically a REST interface. Right? So it's using the power and simplicity of the web. They created price quote, just a simple / price quote / booking. Using this tool, you can define your API, and then you can go into some details around what the get, post, put, delete methods are around that, and describe actions around that. So creating, this is the simple definition part. Then you want to document. Right? So this is an example of using the tool, how you can document the API. Not only do you document the API with things like user guides and examples, but you can also set service level definitions. Remember we talked about quotas and different service classes around different users and metrics that will feed back to you. So you can see how various groups are using your APIs. And that's part of the documentation. I like this part a lot. I mean, when you think about systems of engagement, interacting with systems of record, here you're seeing one of the real core strengths of a technology and set of tools like Cast Iron, where you can map your REST interfaces to your core services that are running on premise. Right? So you can do a lot of this without coding, right? And as far as it'll take you, and then there's ways to get into the code and customize it. Right? So in this case, the interesting part is that it's a simple the REST service is kind of net, so it's only the bare minimum set of fields. In the core service running back in the enterprise, it's richer, but you're only mapping to the things that you absolutely need. In some cases, you have to do some transformation of data types, maybe from JSON to SOAP. Again, you can do that visually with this transformation set of tools. The other thing is we provide something called a secure connector, which a developer could place in their DMZ, or an enterprise could place in their DMZ, and this gives Cast Iron Live access to your core services on-premise. All right? And then for socializing, we set up a splash page automatically based on the information that you've given, so that people can come along and explore your APIs. They can actually look at your samples and try things out. All right? So that's the first part of extending APIs to developers. So you can just imagine, and pardon the net approach here, just to give you a flavor of how they might do that. The second is they have a web-based mobile application, and now they want to make that application more engaging. They're going to use WorkLife Studio, which is an Eclipse extension that we have, which came as part of our WorkLife acquisition. So what does it mean to make their web-based mobile app more engaging? Well, we're going to do three things to make it more engaging. We're going to first make it into a hybrid application. Then we're going to add notifications, and we're going to actually put some personal data, like a flight itinerary, on an encrypted store. So to do this, again, they're going to use WorkLife Studio. So why a hybrid application? WorkLife supports building native applications, web-based mobile applications, and hybrid. Hybrid, I think, is important because it gives the developer the best of both worlds. You can actually put the app in an app store, in a native app store, for it to be kind of socialized, so people could go rate it and rank it. When you have an update, you can force them to pay attention to your application and see that there's a new version, etc. But it's all controlled from your Java-based middleware system, right? So it's all controlled from your backend system. So if there's an update, you get to set the rate and pace of when that application gets updated, right? So that's why they're building it. And I think WorkLight is pretty cool because they have a wide variety of support for OS types, right? So you kind of just check off the ones that you want to support for supporting a hybrid model. The other thing I like is the organization. I really like the way they organize the mobile project inside Eclipse. So you get folders. There's a common folder that handles your common artifacts. And building a hybrid application inside WorkLight means you're going to be using JavaScript, HTML5, CSS, and things like that. Right? So that's what you have here. And then you have folders that override the default here for your device-specific OSs. So that was the first piece. The second is want to add notifications. Again, with WorkLight, there's this thing called the Universal Push Notification Service. And it prevents you from having to know what your end user is using from a device perspective. So when a WorkLight application is deployed, it registers with the WorkLight server, and now the WorkLight server knows how to notify you. So if you're an Apple user, it knows to use the Apple notification network to send a notification out. And here's a simple piece of JavaScript that you would use to notify all users of their baggage details. Right? So it's really simple in the sense that it doesn't actually require you to know all the interfaces to get to a particular device type. So it takes the complexity of that out. The third area of how to make the application more engaging is to actually push information out and store it on the phone. WorkLight supports an encrypted store, which acts kind of like a file system on the device. You can write to it with a very simple line of JavaScript. And I'll show you in a second how that can be controlled back from the server. All right, so now we're moving right along. We've finished Extend. The mobile app is now engaging. So we want to focus on security a little bit. So this is WorkLight Studio. WorkLight Studio allows you to control all versions of your mobile applications from a single point. Cool thing about WorkLight is when an application starts, you have an option to have it send a heartbeat message out to the WorkLight server. And in that heartbeat, the application and user can be validated. And if the application and user is valid, the application is allowed to run. A lot of that is controlled from this center point here. So for example, I can disable the 1.0 version of the application, and I can enable the 1.1 application on iPhone and Android. And that's what that green dot is. Right? If someone tries to access the disabled version, they'll get a notification that says the application is no longer valid, and here's where to go to pick up the new one. All right? So when you think of security in mobile applications, it's also about how you control the application, right? And it's something to think about, something we really didn't have to really think about when we were building servlets, per se. Right? So these are our new extensions. Similarly, we talked a few seconds ago about putting data on the encrypted store. Well, when that heartbeat occurs, one of the things we can do is check the integrity of the phone. We can check to see if it's been jailbroken or some other type of event that occurred on the phone. Maybe the CRC match of the application that we put in the Android store is no longer the same. The application is being spoofed. So if the integrity of the application is compromised, an event will occur. If you try to run it, it will actually clear you have the option to clear the encrypted cache. But notice it doesn't delete their pictures on their phone. It just deletes the content of that application. All right? So now we're transacting securely. The last couple steps is we want to transact elastically and we want to optimize. So this is Rachel. Maybe a couple of you saw Jason McGee's conversation about pure application system. Rachel is thinking about how, like my example with ESPN, how a couple of months ago during storm season, there were these bursts of people trying to rebook and get price quotes. Right? So she wants her application to act more elastically. This is pure application system, and you're looking at a pattern within your application system. So my net view of this is, if the industry, IBM, Oracle, and all associated were Coca-Cola, we would have been selling our middleware like, aluminum, salsa, syrup, and then a 5-inch thick document saying, thirsty, you're just 6,000 steps away from quenching your thirst. Now with environments like Pure App System, you can actually create a pre-integrated solution, right? This is a lot of stuff that we've been boasting about, our patterns of expertise. So in this case, Rachel actually created a pattern that describes her mobile application, her web applications, right, that are implementing their REST interfaces, a decision server, which I'll talk about in a second, and a database, and how that all relates together. The cool part about a pattern is, first of all, we don't talk about products. Right? We talk about capabilities, and that's a big thing going forward in IBM nomenclature. We're going to really be focusing on what things do versus what we call them as a product name. And this helps. I mean, we do have a lot of products, like every big software company. Some of them have similar functions and overlap in some areas, and the burden falls on our customers to sort through that. We hope with this approach we will be able to simplify our portfolio and how we go about things. Cool aspect here is patterns do two things. They describe capabilities, like I was just talking about, but they also describe behavior. So what you're looking at here is, how do you scale your Java app server? And in this case, the way you scale it is you have a scaling policy, which describes if what happens in this case, the scaling policy is based on CPU, and it says if the CPU goes out of this range, 20% to 80%, then add another app server instance. Start with 1 and go up to 10. Right? So no longer do you need server configuration to do that. You can specify that as part of your pattern. Also, caching. I know a lot of folks, especially around Java app servers, HTTP session, and how to manage session caching. Oracle has coherence, IBM has extreme scale. Well, with the click of a button, you can bring the power of extreme scale to cache your sessions, right? So pretty simple way to do that. All right, we're transacting elastically, and we're down to the last piece here, which is optimize. And as I said before, this is really the reward of the engaging enterprise pattern. We're going to use the IBM Operational Decision Management tool to actually describe a set of business rules in the form of a decision table here to attach behavior such that, for example, if the transaction volume of my server is high, and if you're a gold customer, I'll feel particularly generous and I'll give you a discount. Right? So based on the volume of your servers, based on the loyalty, I can actually distribute discounts and not do it statically. And hopefully, what Clara's hoping for is this will stimulate business, right, and drive more transactions. It's an example. Another on the customer loyalty side is, again, the incidents, right, like delays, baggage lost. They're encoded in a set of rules. So here, if the flight is delayed and you're a gold customer, you'll get a notification saying the flight is delayed, and you'll also get a lounge pass. All right, so this is how Clara could more, in a finer grain and in real time, augment the behavior of their engaging applications. All right, and that's it. We've completed the checklist. And the way the story goes, after 6 months, there are lots of apps now written by Acme Airlines and also third-party app providers against their APIs. The ecosystem has grown. Transactions are going up. Customer satisfaction is going up, of course. This is where analytics comes in, and at the last point, everything in this system, big data is not only a birthright of databases. Application servers also should be collecting data, as I said, as interactions and transactions are occurring. The ability to gain insight across that I believe traditional monitoring has hit a ceiling. Right? What we used to do with some of our monitoring tools around Java specifically have hit the wall, and being able to utilize big data to do that is really important. So in this last example, Claire actually uses a built-in big data system to see where her APIs are being called. Right? So you can see so many are calling from the web, so many are being called from iOS, and a bunch are being called, 45% being called from Android. And she can use this data to perhaps kind of tweak her business rules to better improve customer satisfaction, to better improve transactions. And maybe she goes back and works with James to even add some new features to the application based on the insights that she's gaining. So that's the story of engaging enterprise. Both the motivation, the design, and an example using some of the modern tools that we've created. The last bit is the fact that we've actually built this application several times. So I want to end the presentation. Before I end the presentation, I just want to walk you through some of the experiments that we're doing to test out the models. So we've written the Acme Airlines application in Java based on the specification that we just talked about. Some of the observations is that when you're building an engaging enterprise application, JEE is found fantastic for building the system of record. However, JEE in its entirety is a bit much for building the system of engagement. Did I say that right? System of record is awesome for system of engagement. There are additional APIs that probably help that are not quite captured yet, so we got to see about getting them captured. Servlets still matter. We're using servlets in Acme Airlines application mostly as a servlet filter to pick off some of the credential information for security. Right? The primary gateway, as you'll see, into the app server is through JAX-RS, but we still employ servlets and a servlet filter to do single sign-on and process the single sign-on token, to do services around cookies, right? To check for access control. And we also see this approach being used by other engaging companies like Twitter. So, this whole hit a web page and then do a redirect. When you have APIs, you don't do necessarily a redirect on your API. So one of the things is being able to do security checks on every JAX-RS call starts to become one of the patterns. And the most uniform way to do this is through a servlet filter. Right? So the first thing this application we had to do when we built this application is a set of security services, authentication services, etc. And we did that through servlets. Next is personalization or profile information that the application does. We're storing all personalization information in a data grid. So data grids are a necessity when you're building engaging applications. You can't be going to a database or another third or fourth tier. Most of these engaging applications are highly personalized. Managing the profiles, managing the details in real time are best done with that data closer to the application. So everything related to customer, this starts to get into kind of master data management at some point. And I think our data grid technologies are evolving not just to generic key value stores, but key value stores with a purpose. And understanding what a customer is one of the purposes that we are evolving through at. There's a set of JSRs out there that talk about accessing data in a cache, and we believe those are pretty important. We have our own APIs for doing that. Oracle has their own APIs for doing that. So as we progress, standardizing those APIs for accessing data in a cache or a data grid is really important. So searching and actually getting at the data, so searching for flights to book, getting current status on flights and booking flights it's interesting. So we've built the data model here around JSON. So the data grid is storing JSON objects. So what is a good transactional store for JSON objects? What is a good transactional or a way to do queries against JSON objects from Java? So we'll talk about that, but we're using, in this example, we're using Spring Data, and we're also using the Mongo extension to Spring Data. But we're not using the Mongo database server. We're using DB2 and Extreme Scale. And in some of the work that we're doing, they actually, those servers, Extreme Scale and DB2, we're teaching to speak JSON natively. And the cool part is, without breaking application compatibility with Mongo, we can do things like multi-statement transactions. Right now, everything in Mongo is a single statement. We can do things like joins, which you can't do directly from Mongo API, and we can do things like set the data source to the date of last Tuesday and run the engaging application against last week's data, which is great for testing and simulating. Right, so we're adding value around those APIs. Right, so how do you do some of the transactional stuff? So the application looks like this. Right, we have our key services, again, all implemented as REST services, running in WebSphere application server with JAX-RS. Right, we have a set of channels into those for business partners, mobile and web channel, all providing different pointers to authorization, authentication, and access functions. And also nuances on how the data is formatted and transformed. We have an event system that we've set up which drives interactions into the application server for things like customer events and flight information. So the last slide I have is, this is the actual server breakdown and the APIs that we're using. So kind of as gateways, we're using Cast Iron's Web API, we're using the IBM WorkLife server, and we're using WebSockets and MQTT for events coming from clients. We have the WebSphere application server version 8.5, and we're using the lightweight Liberty profile. We're using JAX-RS as the front end, as I said, to many of these services. We have a bunch of POJOs that are sitting behind that. We're using right now, and we plugged in about 4 or 5 different views to this. We're currently using Spring Data, and we're using both our cache API for getting the client information in the data grid and doing some of the JSON queries that I talked about. We have the data service, like I described a couple seconds ago. We're also using something called really small message broker to handle the events coming from the engaging clients, the mobile and other devices, coming into our MQTT broker, talking through our messaging MQTT client, which allows us to do lightweight messaging. And last but not least, we have a parallel system, parallel universe running right next door in a set of app server instances, which is our analytics engine, and we're using Lucene and Elasticsearch as a set of Java-based APIs to both index, trigger events, and also interact with unstructured data. So that's how we built the Acme Airlines application. We've also built the application in other languages that sit on top of Java, and we've also built it with Node.js. So we're experimenting with the various types of methods for building these engaging applications. So with that, I conclude my presentation. So I think, in summary, that what we're into right now, with the advent of mobile, cloud, social, and big data, the next 5 years are going to make the era of the web pale in comparison. It's a new era in applications. It's a new style of applications that combine systems of engagement with systems of record. Just like for web applications, platforms like WebSphere paved the path for customers, and Java paved the path for customers to get to that new medium, the web. And in this case, what is the platform that is going to pave the way for customers writing this new style? Well, folks, we're here. I think WebSphere and Java, with a couple tweaks here and there, make a perfect platform for building engaging applications. I'll stick around for a few more minutes. If you have any questions, it's a small group, so feel free to come up. Thank you for your time and enjoy Java 1. Cheers.